Which do you value more? A great safety that prevents a lot of problems or a great edge rusher that presents a lot of problems? Let's get into it. Hi, hello, and welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast. This is episode number 174, and I am your host, Austin Elmore. Today's topic is going to be about two of the names mocked to the Bengals the most: edge rusher Rueben Bain Jr. out of Miami and safety Caleb Downs out of Ohio State. We'll talk about both of them in just a minute. You'll also hear from Joe Goodberry, the great Bengals analyst from the YouTube show Bengals on the Brain. He joined me earlier this week on 700 WLW. I asked him about these guys, about some prospects. You'll hear about 2 minutes of Joe towards the end of the show. But we should get started with the fact that the Bengals made a move. The Bengals have re-signed veteran nickel cornerback Jalen Davis. Jalen is one of my favorite players, and way back during training camp, I was singing the praises and preaching the gospel of Jalen Davis because I believed in him as a capable nickel corner who could tackle. But for whatever reason, the Bengals didn't see it that way, and he really didn't get any opportunities until much later in the season. And when he did get those opportunities, guess what Jalen Davis was? A veteran nickel corner who was capable and could tackle. He presented a lot of problems. I don't know that I'd say he presented a lot of problems, but he steadied the ship at that position for the Bengals. He's well liked in the locker room. He is re-signed with the Bengals for this season. Jeff Hobson, my guy over at Bengals.com, reported it. Jalen just turned 30. Defensive backs coach Charles Burks called him one of the most consistent players he's ever been around or that he's ever coached. That sort of stuff is important. Jalen Davis is liked in the locker room. I posted a picture that I took from the Bengals website over on my Twitter of Jalen in the locker room eating that big turkey leg after the Bengals won on Thanksgiving. And he's also a guy who's been around for a long time. He played in Super Bowl 56 for the Bengals, albeit it was on special teams, but he's grinded his way up and is still in the NFL and performed really well down the stretch for the Bengals last year. I'm glad that they've shored up, at least for now, one of those cornerback spots, and specifically that nickel cornerback slot that he is going to be in. He had a good training camp last year. He didn't get the opportunity. I hope now that he's proven himself to Al Golden that he will get a little bit of an opportunity, and we'll see how things go in training camp. So the Bengals have gotten a few things done. You know, they've extended guys like Mitchell Tinsley and like Jalen Davis. We're still waiting on the big move to get Dalton Reisner back in the equation as the Bengals starting guard. That hasn't happened. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon. Other than that, I'm not really expecting any other moves between now and the NFL, or now and free agency, which is now less than a month away, or right at a month away, if I'm not mistaken, the start of NFL free agency. It's it's less than a month away. February always screws me up. We're like, yeah, it's less than a month away now for NFL free agency beginning, which is fantastic. Always something to talk about in the NFL. I don't expect there to be any moves between now and then, and here's why. The other thing that's happened this week is Trey Hendrickson and that conversation coming back to the forefront. I won't bore you with a bunch of Trey Hendrickson talk again, but basically what happened is earlier this week, the franchise tag window opened. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, and if you follow football, you know what the franchise tag is, and the Bengals used it last year on T. Higgins, and they ended up coming to an extension. They could still use the franchise tag this year on Trey Hendrickson with the idea of tagging him and trading him, but it just doesn't happen very much across the NFL. There's some complicated stuff that comes with that. There's also a specific type of tag that you can trade him that still allows him to negotiate with other teams. Once he negotiates with another team, the Bengals and Trey sign that deal, immediately trade him to that team, and that team trades whatever back to the Bengals. I think if the Bengals could have their way, that's what they would do. They would tag Trey, trade him to another team. That way they kind of control where they go and they get something back for him right away, as opposed to if he leaves in free agency, they get a pick next year, but that pick is depending on how much the Bengals sign and what the Bengals do in free agency. So the Bengals don't want to be hamstrung by those rules, if that makes sense. So I think in an ideal world, the Bengals would love to trade him. And we kind of got confirmation of that. Kelsey Conway of the Inquirer reported earlier this week that the Bengals plan on spending the week in Indianapolis, which is next week at the NFL Scouting Combine, gathering data and figuring out what the value for Trey Hendrickson is by talking to other teams at the combine and saying, hey, where do you see Trey? How do you value him? What would you give up for him? Blah, 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 blah. And kind of beginning those early stages of the negotiations. Now, if I'm another team and I'm interested in Trey Hendrickson, and I know that the Bengals don't really want to franchise tag him, and I know that, they're not in a good spot, the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson, and ultimately the Bengals are either going to let him go or trade him. I'm probably going to lowball the Bengals. I'm going to make it seem like I don't think there's really an opportunity. I don't think there's. I'm not going to offer them a deal that they can't refuse, basically, because you know that they might have to let him go, or you know that other teams across the league maybe won't offer them that good of a deal because their hands are tied. And so, if you're one of those other teams, would you rather take your chances with Trey in free agency, or would you have to give something up for him? Again, Trey is getting older. He was hurt most of last year. There's a bit of a locker room issue there with Trey. So, for all those reasons, how committed are these teams to being able to give up something that the Bengals would want in return that they feel like is worth the hassle of going through the franchise tag process? I don't know what that number is, but Kelsey Conway reported that the Bengals do expect to figure that out over the next couple of weeks and figure out what they want to do with Trey Hendrickson, because once that free agency thing happens, the free agency window begins, the new league year begins, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So they only have a couple of weeks to figure out what they want to do. My gut right now tells me that the Bengals will let Trey walk unless they get an offer that they can't refuse in Indianapolis, and they're able to sign and trade Trey basically for a third round pick. I would be thrilled with a third round pick. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I feel like that's the best that they could do at this point. And I feel like that might be the best offer that they would receive in Indianapolis at the combine. Good reporting from Kelsey there to kind of get in the mind of what the Bengals are doing and what they're planning on doing, and set forth a little bit of a timeline when it comes to Trey Hendrickson. Speaking of the combine, that's next week in Indianapolis. I hope that I'm there for a portion of it, but I don't know if I will be or not. And we'll talk more about that next week. We'll have a little bit more information through the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of the combine and move from there, including a couple of things that Joe Goodberry told me this week that I'll bring back next week as well about the NFL scouting combine. But I want to make this episode about two players, really, to be honest. And those players are Caleb Downs, the safety out of Ohio State, and Rueben Bain Jr., the edge rusher out of Miami. Now, earlier this week, the hype on Caleb Downs has gone through the roof, as it should. Many people are getting into their film evaluations and figuring out, who exactly does this well and that well. And you're starting to see spread out across the league just how much people love Caleb Downs. And that hype train, it is full steam ahead. Here's a tweet from Adnan Nanduri. Excuse me if I said his name wrong. He said, Caleb Downs is breaking my brain. He's so good of a football player, I can't figure out how to value him on a draft board. I know he's a safety. I know that contract values for draft position matter. He's the exception. I've watched every snap he played for Ohio State countless times, and I just don't know a dude capable of doing the things he does. That's a pretty strong opinion about Caleb Downs. It's coupled up with Albert Breer from the MMQB, who says the following: I feel comfortable saying Caleb Downs is the best football player in the 2026 draft class. He won't be the first pick. You have to consider upside, positional value, all that. There are guys with more of all that stuff, but no one in the class is a better football player than Caleb Downs. Now, Albert's a little bit biased. He's an Ohio State fan, but he also understands great football when he sees it. What about Dane Brugler from The Athletic, their top NFL draft guy and scouting guy? He said this: fun question I've been asking to scouts. Caleb Downs is the best safety prospect you've scouted since? A few have answered ever. That's high praise from NFL scouts about Caleb Downs. And it takes me back to the question I opened the show with. What do you value more? A great safety like Caleb Downs, who can prevent problems from happening in the back end, or a great pass rusher like Rueben Bain Jr., or maybe one of the others that's going to be available to the Bengals at number 10? It feels like there's a better likelihood that Caleb Downs is there at number 10 than any of the top flight edge rushers in this draft. Guys like Arvell Reese, guys like David Bailey, guys like Ruben Bain. But there is a possibility where both of those guys are there or one of those two is available. And you kind of wonder, what do you value more as a Bengals fan? I put a poll up on Twitter, and you can go to my Twitter if you haven't already. It's at Auty Elmore, AutyElmore. And I simply asked, who would you rather have? You can only pick one, Caleb Downs or Rueben Bain Jr. With over 1,000 votes and still 3 hours remaining on the poll, 52% of people said Caleb Downs as the guy that they want for the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's hard to watch the last couple of years of the Bengals and how bad the safety play has been with guys like Geno Stone and at times Jordan Battle and others, and not agree with that sentiment. Of course, I mean, they've been unbelievably bad at that position. You have to be able to clean that up, and there are guys that are available, safeties that are available in free agency, and we talked about that last week. Can you get a safety between now and then that allows you to take the best player available in the draft? And the best player might still be a safety. It might still be Caleb Downs. But I think it's incredible that there is a prospect of this caliber, but people don't know what to do with him because of the positional value of safeties. We can get into a little bit of that at a later time. But I'm mainly thinking of this through two lenses because I've seen two mock drafts, and I think it's important to note mock drafts are entirely useless between now and free agency, and after free agency is when it starts to make sense because of what we've talked about a lot, that the teams have figured out what their needs are and where they're going. But Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network, their top draft guy, he mocked Caleb Downs to the Bengals this week. Paul Dehner Jr., who covers the Bengals for The Athletic, he mocked Rueben Bain to the Bengals this week. There are two different sets of criteria, two different processes, but two results that I think both would love, that Bengals fans would love. Me personally, I love Caleb Downs. I love Ohio State. I love the way he plays. I do think he's an unbelievable football player. But the lessons that we are taught repeatedly from Super Bowl 60, Super Bowl 59, and seemingly every other Super Bowl is that you win and lose with dudes in the trenches. And if you go back to what Duke Tobin said earlier this week or earlier this offseason as well, he talked about how you have to fix the pass rush. The priority is the pass rush. Now, in an ideal world, they would set themselves up nicely with the pass rush and free agency, and boom, you're able to take best player available or safety or whoever it might be at number 10. I also know that they like the idea of being able to get pass rush from the interior. Ruben Bain fits that mold a little bit more because of his body type. He would be a perfect fit. I love Caleb Downs. I love great safety play. It's beautiful to watch, but I value more the problems presented by a pass rusher than I do the problems prevented by a safety. And for that reason, whether it's David Bailey or Ruben Bain or any of the other top guys, if they're available, I would have to lean towards an edge rusher over Caleb Downs. But I do want to point out what and how bad and why a lot of Bengals fans might agree with the idea of getting Caleb Downs. The Bengals, I don't know where I saw this. I think it was Pro Football Focus or something. I took the screenshot. I did not adequately provide credit, so I apologize. The Bengals, this was from a mock draft that had them taking Caleb Downs. It says the Bengals haven't had a true star at safety since they let Jesse Bates walk in the offseason in 2023. In fact, Cincinnati's safeties have combined for the lowest PFF grade as a unit over the past 3 years, 53.7. Downs would change the team's trajectory at the position after garnering an elite 93.6 PFF grade for his college career. Think about that for a moment. In the years after Jesse Bates, The combined total PFF grade of the safety position for the Bengals, 53.7. That's why Bengals fans are understandably scarred and upset about that position and do think that it would make a significant difference. And I agree with them. I just put value on pass rushers and being able to affect the quarterback and that having a trickle down effect on the rest of the defense. Now, you can use that same argument in the opposite direction. Well, if more things are covered and more things are taken away, that creates more time and more opportunities for your defensive linemen to get to the quarterback. And I agree 100%. But in this hypothetical situation, I don't know how you could pick anyone but an edge rusher just based off of how bad the Bengals have been. And you also assume that Trey Hendrickson is not going to be there this year. So over 1,000 votes, 52% say Caleb Downs is the guy that they would take. Now, there are other people who say there are very few players ahead of Rueben Bain. There are very few players ahead of Caleb Downs, but Rueben Bain is one of them, and it's hard to disagree with that. Let's hear. This is what Dane Brugler from The Athletic wrote about both Caleb Downs and Rueben Bain Jr. Here's what he says about Downs. He has him number 4 overall on his top 100 prospects. A human missile, Downs jumps off the tape because of his fast, competitive play style. Despite his average size, he is an elite tackler who fills with impressive body control and strength at contact. He showed the same high-level reaction skills in coverage. Downs sees the field like a chessboard. He is one of the better safeties I have ever evaluated. That's Dane Brugler on Caleb Downs. Caleb, by the way, 6 feet tall, 205 pounds. He is a little bit undersized for a safety in the National Football League. If you go up to number 9 on his top 100, Dane Brugler has Rueben Bain, the edge rusher out of Miami, 6'3", 275 pounds. A little bit shorter arms than what you would like normally from a pass rusher, but here's what he says. Carrying a uniquely thick body type with short arms and average get-off, Bain isn't the picture-perfect embodiment of what NFL teams covet in a pass rusher, but he consistently deconstructs blocks with power and is a tough player to slow down. He uses anvil-weighted hands to jar blocks off balance or command the edge in the run game. Bain helped answer some of scouts' concerns with his dominant stretches in the college football playoff. You're in a position at number 10 in the NFL draft where it doesn't really matter. Either one of these guys that you get, you're going to be thrilled with. They're going to help your football team. I just have this overwhelming belief that football starts and stops and is won and lost in the trenches and always will be. And if you have a series of pass rushers that can win consistently, that can provide pass rush from multiple positions, and if you're able to supplement that position, especially in free agency, and add one of these guys, whether it be David Bailey or Rueben Bain or whoever it might be, then I think you've got to do that, and I think that's incredibly important. I do want to share with you this clip from my conversation earlier this week on 700 WLW with Joe Goodberry. Joe is at Joe Goodberry, JoeGoodberry. I don't know why I said it like that. I guess because that's how I always say my at. Anyways, Joe's been doing it a long time. He's been a great friend of the show and to us over the years. He is as good as it comes when it comes to evaluating players and having a deep understanding of scouting and what people are looking for and specifically how the Bengals like to operate. So here's about 2.5 minutes of conversation I had with Joe on Sunday.
When it comes to the guys that could be available to the Bengals at number 10, where are you leaning right now? And among these prospects, who's been the most impressive one that you've watched so far?
Yeah, that's probably 2 different questions. Sometimes I'm not going. There's going to be a guy like a Caleb Downs, obviously, that is probably the most impressive guy on tape, where he's doing everything you want him to do. He knows where the ball is going. He's getting to the hole or getting to the outside where the ball is supposed to go before the ball carrier. He's often jumping routes before the quarterback's eyes are even getting there. He's just a tremendous safety, as good as you can possibly be on tape. Now, is he the biggest guy or is he the fastest? We're going to find that out at the combine. Typically, the safeties that go top 10 are the freaks, the guys that are big and fast, right? The Sean Taylors. And even Kyle Hamilton, I think he was like 13th overall, 14th overall. Those guys that go top 15, Derwin James was also big and athletic, right? Those guys tend to be the bigger ones, and Downs isn't that, which is why he could fall a little bit and be available at 10. And if he is, I think he's going to be a top 3 player on pretty much every board. It's just going to be positional value. So I could see easily being the guy the Bengals want, and he's going to check every single box. But to me, the best pass rusher is David Bailey out of Texas Tech. A lot like Trey Hendrickson, where he's not the best against the run, but you know what? He's got every single move. He's explosive off the edge. He converts speed to power very, very well because he's not the biggest guy either, but he packs a punch when he gets his hands on offensive tackles. And I started watching offensive linemen recently, and they're all losing to David Bailey. David Bailey is he's the guy. He's the pass rusher in this draft. And everyone loves Rueben Bain. I do too. But Bain is more of a power run defender guy you're going to kick inside, where Bailey's that edge guy. That you need an edge pass rusher to win on third down in the crunch situation end of the game. It's going to be David Bailey. So if I had a chance to get him, or if he got to like pick 6, I'd be interested in trading up if it was me. If you're still putting me in that position, you know, in leading the Bengals charge. But yeah, I'll give you an underrated guy that I think is probably a top 15 player in this draft. I don't think the Bengals will consider him at 10, but I won't. Don't be shocked. We're in February now. We got 2 months. In 2 months, if Dylan Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon, is considered a top 25, top 20, Cowboys have a pick at 20. I wouldn't be shocked if that's like the spot for him there. I do believe consensus right now, I've got him up. Yeah, consensus 35th overall. I think he's going to end up going top 25. So that's a player that I think is going to blow it up at the combine too, and everyone's going to be in love after that.
Great stuff there from Joe. And by the way, he mentioned Dylan Thieneman, that safety from Oregon, and how he expects him to move up into the top 20. Well, the day after Joe and I had that conversation, Daniel Jeremiah released his latest mock draft, and he has Dylan Thieneman going number 18 to the Minnesota Vikings. Joe Goodberry knows what he is talking about. All right, that does it for me. Next week, we'll continue looking at some possible prospects, maybe get a little bit into free agency as well. The NFL Scouting Combine will be happening once again in Indianapolis. We'll learn some stuff. There will be some risers. There will be some fallers in the NFL Scouting Combine. We'll do Scouting Combine, then we get into pro days, then we get into free agency, and so on. It never really stops in the National Football League. I also want to give a shout out at the end of the show. Baseball season's right around the corner. We're 36 days at the time of me recording this until opening day. And I just want to shout out my guy, Charlie Goldsmith. I think he's been on the podcast before. He's obviously been on the show a lot. Charlie is pumping out so much incredible Red stuff every single day on Charlie's chalkboard. And to be able to, as a Reds fan, I've always argued that when the Reds are in Arizona, or when they're away, they feel very distant, and the coverage doesn't really feel, like there's so many surprises. There's so much stuff that I don't know when they leave spring training. And when you look at like a Bengals training camp, for example, there's almost too much information. There's tons and tons of beat writers there. There's video, there's takeaways, there's reactions, there's constant conversation around Bengals training camp. And you never get that from Red spring training. And I've never understood if that's just because they're in Arizona and the time change is weird and they're just less accessible, or if there's less hype, or what exactly the conversation or what exactly the reason is. But it is so refreshing and so cool as a Reds fan that I can wake up in the morning and go to the inbox from Charlie's chalkboard and read 3 different stories about 3 different people that I learned something about the Reds that gives me some perspective and contextualizes their spring as we start the season and get into the regular season coming up in 36 days. Charlie's just doing an awesome job at it, and he's my friend, so this is just a shout out to him. He's kicking ass, and if you haven't, I recommend, if you're a Reds fan, going and checking out Charlie's chalkboard, because it's just incredible the amount of content that he's putting out. He's the man. And also shout out my guy, Hunter Green. If you know, you know. That does it for this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked it, please like it on wherever you're watching it. Give it a rating, subscribe to it, follow it, share it. Do something to help the podcast grow. I'd really appreciate it. You can follow along all my social media at Auty Elmore. That's AUTYELMORE. And we'll talk to you again next week. As always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.